Okay, Vivek, I think we can start now.
Sure.
So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on financial management for entrepreneurs in challenging times. Today's webinar will be led by Mr. Vivek Krishna Govind, who is a senior partner of Varma & Varma Chartered Accountants and is a TiE Kerala charter member. Mr. Vivek has more than 20 years of experience in various areas of audit, taxation, management consultancy. He qualified the CA final exams with the ICAI award for the highest marks from Kerala. He also qualified the Certified Information Systems Auditor CISA examination conducted by IASACA USA. Mr. Vivek has been the past president of the Kerala Management Association KMA. He's a past chairman of Ernakulam branch of Institute of Chartered Accountants ICAI. He's a past president of the Young Indians, which is also a part of CII, and he's also been a past president of the Rotary Club of Cochin Downtown. He was nominated to the top 50 Youth Icons of Kerala Award, and he's also represented India in the G20 Youth Summit at Istanbul in 2015. He served as a visiting faculty and is associated with various premium management schools across Kerala. I welcome Vivek and request him to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nirmal, and very warm welcome to all the participants at the session. At the outset, it's very interesting that we are meeting today in very, very different circumstance and under very different platform. Many of us here have met already at several sessions where we would have been talking about. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead. It's very clear.
Yeah. How about the sharing? Is that?
Yeah, the slide is also open. No problem with it. I think you can zoom it up.
Okay. Okay. Just a minute. I'll just. There's some issue on my screen.
Ah, sure.
Yeah. That's fine. Can you see the screen, Nirmal?
I can see the screen, but if you can project the slide, yeah, that option. Yes.
That's fine.
Perfect now.
All right, great. So today we are going to be talking and discussing about a topic which is of great relevance: financial management in challenging times. And frankly, speaking on this topic right now itself is a great challenge, because we are living in extremely uncertain times, and we really do not know. Even as we speak, the situation is evolving. But as many of you know, we've met for various sessions, and I like to do a top 10 whenever I speak. And this time also I will be trying to talk about the top 10 areas to focus on when it comes to financial management in challenging times. So this will be the presentation flow. I'll talk about cash flow and working capital management. I'll try and spend some time there. Control over costs and expenditure, fund diversion, budgeting, capital debt leverage, systematic accounting, financial reporting and MIS, internal control system, business plan and use of technology, and finally some of the opportunities. And ideally, let's try and keep this as a discussion platform also, though I'm aware that with about I think around 75 of us in the room, it may not be possible to discuss online as we go, but probably I'll try and stop when I speak after each topic is covered, so that we can have some degree of interaction, and we'll also try and take up some of the questions on the chat box. Now, one thing which is very clear as far as the format is that we will be focusing on the financial management aspects today, and we have a little over an hour. So we will not be looking at the regulatory side or the statutory side, because there is another session I understand which is likely to be fixed sometime soon. That session itself will take at least a couple of hours. So if we try and mix the two into one session, then it may not be very meaningful. So we'll try and restrict our discussion today to aspects which are more relevant from a financial management perspective. Now, before I move into my specific top 10, let me just run you through a study which was done by McKinsey a few years ago. And this is very interesting because, as you can see from this slide, more than 87% of business failures happen as a result of economic factors or financial causes. That's a fairly large percentage when you see it this way. And what we're going through right now, the troubled COVID times with a virus having taken over the world, what we must understand is that this is a huge, unexpected situation that we are under. The world has seen very many situations before, SARS and tsunami and the Wall Street crash and so many things in the current century. But the pandemic, which the COVID has caused, has gone beyond all of that. This is a recession which is hitting every nook and corner of the world. So that's, in that sense, this is slightly, or if not slightly, in a very substantial manner, I must say, different from the other more localized recessions that the world has faced earlier. And hence the methodology to overcome this will also be something which will have to evolve over time. Even as we speak, if we were to speak about this 2 weeks ago, we would have spoken in a certain way. As we speak today, we are having a slightly different perspective. Probably a month from now, our perspective today also would possibly have changed. So it's a very, very evolving topic. So I think probably, we can do a revisit of this topic a couple of months from now, and see whether what we are discussing today is relevant, and whether it needs to be tweaked in line with the changing world. So now, how do we overcome this? Is what we will try and discuss, and how do we try and find some common ground here, so that all of us can come together and work as a group, work as the entire ecosystem coming together to try and tackle this economic factor leading to financial failure also. So 87% plus or minus, you can also add the fraud there, which also to some extent is as a result of financial. So roughly 90% of what we see here is coming under this. And you will see in the second item there is disaster, which is another 5% or so. So disaster, fraud, economic, financial, it's all happening now. So roughly we have enough reason to believe that that 95% of the factors which lead to business failure are right now working in this environment now. And unfortunately, we are at the receiving end right now. But I'm very, very sure and confident that as we have seen in every other calamity and every other situation which has rocked the world, we have seen that the world has come out a better place. We have seen that the countries which have suffered the most have also, wherever there is an innovative mindset, we have seen that they have also turned their world around, and now the world is very, very different in those countries. As probably the best example would be Japan after the World War II, and one would have thought that Japan is finished and can never rise again, but in another 25-30 years they turned around their economy and had all the nations in the world as their customers, and they were controlling the economy, so to say. So on that optimistic note, let us move on to the first topic here: cash flow and working capital management. And I think that is certainly a very, very, very important topic that we will have to look at, because right now the SMEs are the hardest hit. I understand that most of us in this room are SMEs. I would have liked to mix this up with a little bit of Malayalam also as I speak. That is what I had intended to do, but while I was testing my slides here, I got comments on the chat box requesting that I should restrict to English as we speak, because I understand there are several delegates who are from outside the state. So I will try and, as far as possible, try and speak in English, but once in a way, please pardon if I add a little bit of Malayalam, because I think that's the best way to connect to people in my home state. Now, when we speak about cash flow and working capital management, what we must understand is that the past 3-4 years, the SME sector has been the hardest hit. We have seen demonetization, we have seen GST, which is more or less stabilizing now, but the first year and a half of GST was extremely turbulent for the SME sector. Large number of players have vanished. The ones who could not innovate, who could not change their business models, today no longer exist. So we have had to encounter two very difficult changes in the last 2-3 years, and now we face the biggest one, which is really shaking up not just the local environment, but completely going to change the way we think, the way we work. Today, the way we meet. This TiE session would have been a physical session in the world that we lived in probably even a month ago. But now moving on, I'm sure for the next 5-6 months, we'll all be meeting more often in the virtual world than in the real world. But cash is real. This is what we must understand. Cash is real. Profit is a buzzword. Whenever we see the results, whenever we read when we read the newspapers and the Economic Times about the reports about the profit growth in companies, etc., it's always the bottom line is the profit. But when in a crisis, what we understand is that profit is something that exists in the books, but cash is what you need in your hand at this point in time. So the old saying, cash is king, is most relevant right now. And this is a time for all of us to buck up, understand where our cash is. To start with, awareness is the first step. Understand where your money is locked. Do you have physical cash? Is your cash in the bank? Is it in stocks? Is it in land? Is it stuck in inventory? Is it with your customers, your sundry debtors, as we would call it? Where is your money? Where is your cash? Identify that first. That is good cash management. Just understanding first where your cash is. I think that is the first and foremost thing that all of us have to do. And it's easier said than done. Many a time, we are all so busy running in our real world on a daily basis that, even if I am to ask a small entrepreneur in this chat room, I'm sure that most of you here would not have a proper account as to where your money is locked. So this is a problem. So we need to first understand and address that. This is a good time for us to take stock of all the items in our balance sheet, understand where each one lies, see whether an asset is an asset, whether a liability is a liability, whether these are actually receivable. If so, within what time frame? Do we need to give some additional discounts at this point? Do we need to give some schemes whereby an installments are given to our debtors? Because we must understand that everybody is going through difficult times. It's not just one sector, or it's not just you and me here, but everyone. Every sector is very, very, very badly affected. So they're all going through the same situation. So let's try and work out different ways in which we should try and bring the cash back where it belongs, basically in our kitty. It's our cash. Similarly, we must also have a plan to pay back. We can try and extend our payment terms, etc. But again, we must also be compassionate. If we are keeping somebody else's cash with us, this is the time when we can help by repaying them as well. If we are in a position to do that, we must do that. Focus on the cash to cash conversion cycle. I'll just bring that up. There is a pictorial diagram also coming up, so I'll discuss that in the ensuing slide. But what is a cash to cash conversion cycle? The companies either borrow short-term loans or use internal cash accruals for their procurement and for all their daily expenses, and these are paid back once the cash is received from the customers. This is a very simple way of describing a cash conversion cycle. And when money is blocked for long, now that is where the problem is. When money is blocked for long, we end up borrowing. And that borrowing comes at a cost. The money which is, I hope all of you are with me on this. I'm trying to go a little basic because I understood the profile of our delegates, and I was informed that we shouldn't be discussing only issues here, but I should be going in a slightly more classroom approach also, so that there could be many of you here who do not understand these concepts. So I will try and simplify it to the extent I can. 1 hour is a very short time. These are all 100-mark exam papers in subjects that we learn. So I'll try and within the given time try and explain these concepts in a brief manner. Now, I think the next slide will give you some idea of what this cash to cash cycle is. How do we begin? We have some cash. We go and we buy. We buy either for cash or we get credit. When we get credit, an item appears in our balance sheet on the liability side called creditors, which basically means people to whom we owe money. Now, once the goods are, let me first try and put this across from a perspective of a manufacturing organization. Now, once the money is, once the material is procured, then you work on it, you add value to it, either manufacture it or do some other value added processes, and it gets converted into inventory. Now, inventory also will be in your stock for some time. Thereafter, you sell the inventory. When you sell it, it's again either for cash or normally these days 90 to 95% of it is on credit. So then an item appears on our asset side of the balance sheet called sundry debtors. And later when the debtors are realized, it becomes cash. So this is the working capital or cash conversion or cash to cash cycle. Now let me just try and put some numbers here to understand whether how robust is your cash management cycle. Now let us say that your sundry creditors are giving you 30 days credit. So you have 30 days to pay your creditors when you buy goods. Thereafter, creditors gets converted into inventory. Once the material is procured, it gets converted into inventory in say 15 days time. Then it lies in your inventory for say 2 months. So that's 15 days conversion into inventory plus 60 days in inventory, 75. Once in inventory, then it is sold 60 days later. And once sold, you have given 90 days credit to your debtors. So you add 15 plus 60 plus 90, 165 days is what it takes for your cash to come back to you. Whereas you need to pay your creditors within 30 days. So you're on a negative 135 days. So what do? You have a cash crunch. So you need a line of credit or you need a working capital funding required. So you borrow. When you borrow, there is an interest. How much of that interest is factored in your product price, in your product costing? That is very, very important. So you must understand what is the interest that you pay in this working capital cycle. One. Second is that we should try and work very hard to try and reduce this cycle. Now from minus 135, let me give you a different example. Now that you buy, instead of 30 days, let us say creditors give you 50 days credit. And once you buy the materials, it gets converted into inventory in 10 days. And you hold your inventory only for 20 days. So that's 10 days to become inventory, the process, the manufacturing process. And then in another 20 days, you sell it, it becomes 30. And you give your creditors only 30 days credit. So in 60 days time, your cash comes back to you and your creditors are giving you say 45 or 50 days time to repay. Then your cash cycle becomes minus 15 or minus 20 instead of minus 135. So now this is very, very, very important that you understand this cycle. Sorry, these slides are skipping. Anyway, I'm not able to go back to that slide, so just give me a minute. So our success is in ensuring that this cycle time is reduced. So every entrepreneur here, please keep this in mind. Many of you here may not even be thinking about this. This is what I understand. This is a topic which I have been speaking at regularly at various forums, and after these sessions, many of you have come back to me, spoken and discussed about these, and some of you have thereafter, few months later, got back to me and told me that yes, we've actually been able to rework this cycle and improve our recovery time, and thereby reduce on the working capital funding that we take from banks. So this is one thing which you must keep in mind when you look at cash flow. And right now, this is a severe crisis that we are facing right now. So the all important thing is to understand how much of money is blocked where as I said earlier, understand how much of cash is with you, understand how much of payables are actually there, how much of inventory is it that you're holding, is it saleable, does it have an expiry date, is your inventory sold and, let's say with a distributor or a dealer, and in turn, you may have considered it as your sale, but the product has not gone out yet. So is there a possibility that it could get returned back to you? Is there a possibility that after expiry date, that you may have to completely destroy these goods? If so, should you be offering better discounts now and trying to liquidate it, or to actually use it up for charity if it is something which is perishable, or some food items which you cannot sell? It would be good if we can let us say contribute to the community kitchen, or whatever. It's a good deed at least that you do, rather than allowing your inventories to go waste. Similarly with your debtors, very, very proactive steps must be taken to recover your money back, right? So just to sum up some of the points that I've discussed when it comes to cash flow and working capital management is focus on inventory management. Focus very much on inventory management. Normally we would say, look at just-in-time procurement and look at ways in which you can reduce the time that you hold your stock. And these are the things we would say in a normal situation. But right now, when we are going through these challenging times, the focus is not only on just-in-time and all that. The focus is on liquidating your inventory. How soon can you get rid of your inventory? How soon can you sell off your inventory at the best available, best possible prices? This is going to be the challenge right now. Everybody is stuck with huge inventory. So how soon can you liquidate it will be one of the indicators of the success of your business. Try and extend payables, try and manage and expedite receivables, consider alternate financing options, have a review done of your payables and receivables transactions, because many a time we see that what is reflected in the books and what is actually payable and receivable are very different. So get that done, get your accountant or auditor to do to have a thorough look and to ensure that your books are also cleaned up, and ensure that the working capital financing remains viable. Finally, if your margins do not suffice for the interest that you pay, then it just doesn't make sense to go in for working capital financing. You must look at alternate methods of doing business. All right, so that's the first task done. So do we need to have some discussion on this, or should I go on to the next topic?
I think you can continue. If there are questions, the participants can use the Q&A section in the Zoom. Right, and also you can raise a hand section. Probably after the PPTs are done, we can unmute you and you can ask questions.
All right. Okay. I thought I didn't want a monologue to be too boring, but since you think I can go on, I'll continue. Whenever you feel that I'm going overboard, I'm willing to take a break at any point in between and take some questions and then come back to this. All right, so we move on to the second of the top 10. I'm not going to be spending as much time on the next few because I'm very much conscious of time. It's 11:30, another 30-40 minutes I must wrap up on my presentation. So this is again going to be a huge challenge for us right now. In the normal world that we were living in, we would always harp on it that cost reduction is important, profit maximization is important, look at ways to reduce expenditure. These are all the standard gyan which we would be giving. But today it's gone beyond that. It has gone very much beyond that. Today it's a situation where it's do or die. Unless you reduce your costs, unless you reduce your expenditure, unless you reduce your overheads, unless you reduce and curtail your wasteful expenditure, you are finished. So understand what are these expenses? Anything and everything. Today, the crisis has taught us that we can all sit in our small rooms and do video conferences and get things done. Do we need swanky offices like the ones that we've been having, for which we've been paying phenomenal amount of rent? Who are we showing all this to? Do we need that? Do we need extremely luxurious kind of, the display of wealth and affluence that has been happening in the past? Is that really necessary now? Who cares about all that anymore? It no longer exists. Today, no impressions can be made because of the size of the car we drive, simply because we're not even driving right now. And even if we go back to that, I think the perspectives of people have also changed. No longer is somebody going to be seen as successful just because he has a car which costs 5 crores. Or I think that world is gone. I think people are becoming more real about the things which truly matter. So understand, each of your organizations, entrepreneurs, you will have different ways in which you can look at cost reduction. Speak to your peers. Speak to people who can help you. It could be a close friend. It could be somebody who till yesterday was your competitor, but today has to be your friend. You cannot today, competition has to change to what they call as co-opetition or cooperation or co-opetition is a new jargon which I've been seeing of late. So we have to all move into that world where we come together, and collectively we need to look at ways in which we can look at reducing costs. Salary, very tough challenge, very difficult. I mean, all other line items we can find out, we can figure out various strategies to reduce, but reducing salary is going to be a really huge challenge, and we have to be compassionate at this time. This is not the time for us to be focused only on our own business. We need to take care of our people. They have worked with us, very loyal all these years. They have much lower income streams and they are fully dependent on us. So this is not really a time for us to be looking at either sending them off or reducing their salary substantially. But I'm sure all of us agree that some degree of reduction is necessary. The entrepreneur obviously cannot bear the brunt of the entire crisis. So certainly some of it will have to be passed on, but I think we need to, there has to be a balance in that, and has to be done in such a manner that we take our employees into confidence. Otherwise, it's going to create a lot of negative energy and turbulence. The message which is coming from the government is that please retain your people. Please try and ensure that you at least keep there. We had a very interesting video conference with the Chief Minister as part of a CII group, and the very first thing that he said was that we want the support of industry to ensure that people stay in their jobs, and you must all support them. It's going to be very difficult for all of you. We will try and work out some package for you, and we'll try and see how we can help the sectors. But right now, please ensure that you pay your salaries and that you retain your people. And I think we need to take that request and advice from the government very seriously. Next point would be to try and convert some of the fixed cost to variable cost. Large number of options are coming up. Earlier, again, we would rent out very large spaces by paying fixed rent. Today, we have a lot of options coming up, co-working spaces and spaces which can be taken on rent, hourly basis, weekly basis, etc. Conference rooms which can be taken on rent. So do we need to invest in very large fixed spaces? Do we need to invest in everything is moving? The alternate models, lease models, rental models, etc. are coming up, which would allow us to convert a large number of our fixed cost to variable cost. So that's something which we should explore in our respective businesses. Costing systems also need to be improved. That's another area where we need to understand costing and margin and all of these things. The world that we are moving to is going to be very difficult in terms of, and everybody is going to look at cutting their margins. Everybody is going to be looking at cutting their costs. So if you are an entrepreneur whose costing system is not scientific, or if you don't have a proper method of costing for your product, then you have a problem there. So earlier I spoke about the cash conversion cycle from a manufacturing industry perspective, and I'm sure all of you can understand that it's very similar when you look at it from a service industry space also. Assume you're an IT company doing your projects, etc. Also, all these concepts apply pretty much the same. You have your work in progress of the product that you're developing. You have your salaries that are going into the product development, etc. You have a time that you take for building your product. You have a time there is for delivering it. You have stage payments, timelines, etc. So all of these things have to be, you need to understand these better, both from a cash to cash cycle as well as from a costing cycle, a product costing also. All these timelines that you give, if you're getting 30% payment today, another 30% after 6 months, you must understand that those 6 months, that delay in getting that payment, there is a cost involved in that. So these have to be factored into your costing before you quote for your work, and things have to be more organized in the world that we live in now. Another suggestion would be to dispose of non-core assets. Try and again convert that money back into cash, or let that money be in your bank right now. All your non-core assets, and try and go for a very lean balance sheet. No point having very large tracts of land somewhere, but you have a huge payable or a statutory payable on the other side, and doesn't make sense anymore. So you reduce your, go lean, especially for organizations which have liabilities. It gives you some revenue which comes back into your business. You can no longer be dependent only on your earlier stream of revenue, which brings me to the next point. Try and look at all possible non-traditional revenue streams. Look out. You just need to think, you need to ideate again, you need to discuss, get together, peer group or friends, or even people like us. We'll be very happy to talk to you first, and as an independent perspective, we can also throw some light on what can come. Possibly it's just discussions which evolve, which lead to ideation, and your whole entire business perspective could change. Your entire revenue model could change over the next couple of years as a result of this turbulent time that we are going through. And think like a CFO. CFOs are the ones who are looking at the finance side of it. They're looking at the financing side of it. They're looking at cutting costs. Most of the other departments are having issues with the CFO because the CFO is trying to cut costs and trying to cut corners. We hear that across organizations, but in a crisis situation, it doesn't make sense to think like a conservative CFO who's trying to reduce costs and to help the entrepreneur to keep the money in the bank right now. Because let me again repeat, at this point, cash is king. Okay, so next I'll move on. My third point is on fund diversion. Again, this is something which happens regularly, particularly from a Kerala perspective. Namada bhashe paranya rolling. I'm sure every Malayali in this room will understand what rolling means, and this is something that is happening all the time. All of us have multiple lines of credit which are available, and banks are after us, or at least they were after us in the world that we lived in earlier. Now we'll have to see how it is. Talking to some of the bankers, I understand they are also going to be very conservative moving forward, because they are also facing a lot of issues of their own. A lot of NPAs are going to come up, so they will also have their own strictures as they move forward. Now, this is not a time for fund diversion. That is my request to you. Long-term funds, if you have borrowed, use it for long-term purposes for which the loan is sanctioned. Do not take a long-term fund simply because the interest is lower. Now, today I have a housing loan running. I can just talk to my banker and he will give me a top-up loan on my housing loan. No questions asked. I just need to send an email. He will give me a top-up loan. But if I take a top-up loan on my housing loan and then I use it for short-term purposes, then there is a problem. Because it's very, very, I have a longer term there, and many a time for long-term loans, it's not just that the interest is lower, but moratoriums are also given. So what happens in that period, if you entirely spend the money for short-term purposes, then you will have no money left to repay. And at one point, you must understand moratorium will end and the clock will start ticking, and then you have no project to show. And in quick time recovery proceedings, banks are going to be very, very, right now, probably a few months, they will be very compassionate because they understand the situation. But in the long term, they are going to be very strict. They're all going to lose a lot of money, and you cannot expect them to be very compassionate when they are losing money. So we must also be very clearly geared up for a world where we must clean up and ensure long-term funds for long-term purposes only, short-term for short-term only. Similarly, you cannot take a working capital loan on your inventory and pay off your car loan. There is not a time for doing that. So these are all things which are happening. You show a higher inventory and receivable in the stock statements or the drawing power statements that you give to the bank, and then you use it to buy a luxury car. It doesn't make sense anymore. Or buy a flat or an apartment in a very swanky space right now. This is not the time for any of that. So stick to what you're doing now. Try and clean up. If at all there has been a diversion, try and let me go back to the earlier slide and repeat. If you have any non-core assets, liquidate it and ensure that you clean up your entire finances now. This is a time when all of us are getting time to sit and think. Normally we are all running around. None of us have the time to sit and think and breathe. Whereas now we have all the time in the world. So get your finances in order. And if there has been a fund diversion in the past, please clean it up. Let's all live the life that that suits our means. Let us not borrow too much and go for large apartments and large cars and all that. At least next couple of years, I think all of us need to be more frugal in the way we think and act. Okay. Moving on, budgeting system, extremely critical. Again, budgeting is very, very, very important. And many of you here may be thinking, how will I even budget? In a situation like this, how do I even budget? It's a very relevant question, I must say. Well, you don't even know when you're going to start. We don't even know when we are able to step out of our homes. Is it in May? Will it be, will we start our businesses back up and running in June, July? So which means basically Q1 is gone. Half of Q4 of last year was gone. So all those budgets have gone for a toss. This is a time when the entire budgeting exercise would have happened in full steam. All the corporates would have frozen their budgets in the last 10 days or probably within the next another 10 days. So by April 2nd week or so, generally everybody has their budgets in place, some of them even earlier. And today we don't even know what to budget, how to budget. That is the challenge, but because that is a challenge, there is also a huge advantage there, because this is a time again for us to completely start on a clean slate, a fresh slate where we start from the very beginning. Very beginning is always the very best place to start, as this old song from Sound of Music would remind us of. And that going back to basics is what I would call, or what the principles. It's called zero-based budgeting. Zero-based means it's like you're starting afresh. Your past is there. You learn from the past. Based on the lessons you learned from the past, you move forward with a completely new perspective. In the historic budgeting principles, what is done is that you take the previous year's number, you add 5%, 5% top line growth, 10% bottom line growth, and whatever one-time items are there, you remove it, and whatever one-time items are likely to come, you add it, and you arrive at a budgeting. That's the historical way in which that's the way in which most of our organizations are budgeting also. That is not relevant in a crisis time. Right now, what we need is zero-based. So this is a good time for all the entrepreneurs here to go back to your drawing boards, to go back to the state of mind you were in when you started your business. You had a certain enthusiasm and zeal in which you started your business. This is a time for you to go back to that mood. And that should be the perspective with which you should be budgeting. Every line item, think afresh. If last year's salary was 10 lakhs, don't just write plus 10% and make it 11 lakhs. No. You must look at how 10 lakhs can become 8 lakhs with top line growth. Similarly, when you look at revenue also, don't just look at last year's revenue plus 5%, plus 8%, plus 15%, whatever it is. That's not the way to look at it. Look at your current business. There could be a dip. You must understand that. So doing a plus 10 or 15% will not make sense in this year. So maybe it could be a minus 10, or maybe you could maintain status quo. You should also look at alternate revenue streams. What else can I do? How else can I make money? Is there any other connected business that I can do that I have been wanting to do, but I've not been able to invest the time to think or ideate? If so, this is a good time. Ideally something connected to what you're doing, because you have core competence in that. If not, even if you have to start something which is completely diverse, still great. But do your homework, and right now you have the time for it. So invest your time wisely and do your homework and start afresh. And zero-based budgeting is the best way to start. Moving on, once you have done a zero-based budgeting, you must also do a capital budgeting. Budgeting basically has two parts, revenue budget and capital budget. And when you're doing your capital budget and when you're looking at the capital situation, understand what is your leverage right now. Capital debt leverage, as in how much is your own money, how much is borrowed money. If your borrowed money is substantially higher than your equity, then you're very highly leveraged and you must have a relook. Do I need so much of debt? Large projects, obviously, let us say if it's a metro is being built, certainly the debt leverage will be very, very high. But for most entrepreneurs who are part of this discussion, I'm sure you can figure out ways in which you can try and reduce your debt so that your debt equity ratio becomes more favorable. Have a relook at all your investment plans, all the capex which you had approved in your earlier budget, also all the plans that are non-essential in nature, all such capex, try and defer it, because this is not a good time for you to be looking at capex which is non-essential. Let me repeat, I'm not saying stop capex here, I'm not saying stop capital expansion or stop growth or none of that. Saying whatever in your own perspective is non-essential. I earlier spoke about a luxury car. You're buying a car, a super luxury car, is it essential? Is something you must look at. A car may be essential, a regular motor car, good. But if you are planning to invest in a substantially higher model car, you have to necessarily think, is it wiser to keep that money in my bank right now? Is something you need to look at. So, and look at various other funding sources. There are a lot of options now. We were all living in a world where, again, it was just happening as such. You had your regular banker, you were in touch with your banker. When you need more money, they would release the money, they would sanction it, they would give you ad hocs, they would give you bridge loans, gap funding, etc. You had a great relationship with your banker. Fantastic. But in troubled times, it's always good to take a relook. There are very many other ways in which you can look at diversifying your funding sources. I'm not going to be advising on any of that right here, because each has its advantages and disadvantages, and there is no one size fits all. So try and understand for your business, for what you do, whether there are other funding sources, whether there are other partnerships you can look at where people come in as co-founders who will also invest into your business. But be sure that they don't run away with your business. It's your bread and butter, so it's important that you continue in there unless it's a strategic exit plan that you have. So these are all things you must keep in mind when you look at the capital debt leverage side of it and the funding side of it. So that's 5. Next 4 or 5 are things which I think are more from a suggestion perspective. First 5 are very critical, that I would say are important. Things which you must do to ensure that your finances are managed well, your cash flows are managed well, that your working capital is managed well, that your costs are cut, your revenues, new revenue streams are added, and looking at different ways to enhance your profitability. Those are the suggestions that I've given in the first 5 topics that I was talking about. Next 4 or 5 are more about ensuring that you get your present act together, because this is a good time for you to again sit and learn, sit and reflect on whether am I doing it right? Have I understood all the elements of the business that I'm in? Is there some activity about which I have no clue? Some of the classroom sessions when I have asked the question about how many of you in this class have a basic understanding of accounting. I'm talking about classrooms with entrepreneurs in it, 50, 60 entrepreneur workshops. I've seen that 75 to 80% of you do not have a basic understanding of accounting practices or a basic understanding of what are the basic books and records. Now that's not good. Definitely for an entrepreneur, because you've taken so much of your life, the risk that you have taken in the business, you understand the product, you understand the market, you understand the business, you understand everything else. No reason why you should have a mind block towards accounting and say that my accountant will take care, that my auditor will take care. year end my auditor will tell me what my profit is. I've actually seen that, where people don't know whether they made a profit or loss. കൊല്ലം കഴിയുമ്പോഴത്തേക്കും നമ്മളോടാ വന്ന് ചോദിക്കുന്നത്, സാർ ഇക്കൊല്ലം ലാഭമാണോ നഷ്ടമാണോ? That cannot be the case. You must have a proper understanding about your accounting. You must have a proper understanding of the difference between cash profit and book profit. To start with, understand that. I think we've spoken about it in fairly good detail in the initial slides. So it's about time that I'm sure all of you understand that's important, but now take that little effort, and what better time than now? Why I'm saying this now is because the lockdown and a partial lockdown, I'm sure all of us are expecting that to continue for the next few days also. It's a good time to actually try and enroll for some online classes. See, trust me, there is no rocket science to understanding any of these things. To get a basic understanding of what is a general ledger, what is a trial balance, what is a bank reconciliation statement, what is a balance sheet, profit and loss account, cash flow statement. Absolutely simple. If you can just spend some time, and this is for you, this is for your business. It is important that you understand. And imagine once you have understood, you are talking to your accountant with that knowledge, the kind of questions which you are going to ask will be very different. Your accountant will see you with much greater respect. Otherwise, what will he think? Hey, sir, he doesn't know anything. He's just doing his business. I'm the one who's running the show. It's sometimes a bloated ego comes in the heads of people who are running the finance department, which is great. I'm a finance person, so I fully support that ego. But nevertheless, the point is that entrepreneurs should be in a position to question, to understand, to ask the right questions, and to only then when the accountant also, he or she will also improve upon themselves. They will also understand that, okay, post lockdown, my boss is different, so I should also now pull up. Otherwise, I'm going to be asked difficult questions. It is something which should be there in the head of the finance person in your organization. And as an add-on to that, to supplement to that slide, it is important that you have a good MIS system in place, financial reporting and MIS. What really is an MIS? MIS is basically the information that you need. Simply put, that's all. You know what are the critical aspects of your business. Each business has different critical numbers. In your business, it's something. In X's business, something. Y, it's something else. In A and B, it's something altogether different. So I cannot really sit and tell you what exactly are the important line items necessary in this. But of course, there are a lot of standard templates. You can go online, you will see. And if you're not able to, feel free to contact any of us. We'd be very happy to help you out on setting up MIS systems, or on sharing some templates with you as a friend. So you can have your own mechanism to have an MIS system in place, and see that comes to you on a regular basis. Depending on the size of your business, you can have weekly or fortnightly or monthly. Some people even have very important MIS documents coming to them on a daily basis. Large number of organizations I know where the CEOs and CFOs, etc., get daily reports on all the critical things which are part of the business. So as SME entrepreneurs, I'm sure you can also devise that, and again discuss with your peers. Some of you here may be slightly more, may have your organizations may have slight degree of maturity, more maturity than some of the others here. There are some startups in the room. There are some established people in the room. I saw some of the, I can see some of the names of the participants, and I know some of you are very, very big businessmen are also participating here. So some of this peer exchange of views and peer exchange of information and best practices, I'm sure in the new world order, I think we're all going to come together, and we should all work together as a team. It's the entire ecosystem that has to come together. It's no longer about my organization and yours, and my firm and yours, or it's no such thing anymore. It's us and all of us coming together, and how we can do that. So MIS, financial reporting, very, very, very critical, and on a regular basis. Once you start a system, ensure that you go about it on a consistent basis. Don't start and then 1 month later, if you stop asking for it, it will die. You must understand that problems with the reports and MIS is that unless the boss consistently drives it for a certain period of time, it will not survive that system, because it's uncomfortable for people to collate the data, give you the data, and then be grilled for the data which they have prepared for you. So everybody will try and evade from this and try to not give you this information. So it's key that you keep driving, you keep harping on it as an entrepreneur that I want it, and react to it also in a very proactive manner, rather than if you start screaming at your people every day based on your MIS, then they're not going to help you in preparing this. So be more understanding about it, at least till it's at least till the whole system is in place. Again, a continuation from that is good internal control systems. Just some of the broad definitions I put on the slide, but in simple terms, good control system basically means that even if the entrepreneur is not going to be there, the system will take care of itself in a very robust manner. Right now, there are many functions which each one of us need to be doing ourselves, or if we are absent for a few days, or that absence is very, very glaring in the way certain things are done or not done. That should not be the case. The control system basically means it's process driven. So have good processes in place and understand the processes. Again, this is depending on the size and scale of organizations. For very large organizations, they have much better systems in place if they have, because they simply understand that to do large volumes, they cannot be dependent on individuals. So either they have an in-house team, or they employ consultants, or they employ people who are full-time working on their control systems and internal control. Internal audit is another activity that's very, very critical to review whether these control systems are in place. So even if you're a very small organization, I would recommend that if you have a friend who's an internal auditor, or if you know somebody who understands your business well, collaborate with them and ask them to engage them as internal auditors. Statutory audit is a mandatory thing which is required as per law, but the internal auditor is somebody who's a part of the organization, who acts like part of the management, and they will certainly help in and the internal auditors will also have the experience of seeing multiple organizations which they are reviewing. So they can help you in setting up your team, or they can help you in to improve upon your own system by sharing best practice. I'm by no means pitching for anything here. Please, there are a lot of options. Extremely competent professionals are there in the city, and chartered accountants are also going through very difficult times. So I'll be happy if you can look at your organization and give the internal auditor to a small CA friend of yours who's also part of the ecosystem. So everybody, we all have to come together, as I earlier said, and only then will the ecosystem grow. Now, business plan. Earlier, when I used to talk on financial management, I think some of you in this room would have. I can see some names who are part of batches earlier. I would start with business plan, because then I would harp on how important it is that business plans are extremely critical, and we must start with business planning and plan, because if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, as Benjamin Franklin would say. But right now, since we are in challenging times, I've just pushed that back a little bit. Still extremely important, very, very important. Every business must have a business plan, and this is a time for you. You get a lot of free time now, so please sit down and write your business plan. And when you write your business plan, again, you can find a lot of nice templates which are there online. So pick up some of those also if you want, and write about the history of the organization, how you started, who are the promoters, write about the background of the promoters, write about what the organization is, write about what the vision was when you started it, write about where you are right now, put some numbers in about your last 2-3 years performance can be brought in. Think about your budgets for the next couple of years. Think about your vision for the next 5 years, your vision for the next 10 years. Bring all this together and you have a business plan. It's really as simple as that. You don't really need large consultants to draw this up for you, but you can certainly, in your own way, you can do that. And certainly, I'm sure there are a lot of people, professionals, who can help you in the process also. But the initial, the master plan or the script for the business plan should come from the head of the promoter or the entrepreneur. So you must document it. Do it in your own style. Let it be in a haphazard. Some of you may be typing it out. Some of you may use notes on your mobile, or some of you may be still using. I still like to write, so I'm sure many of us in this room are people who still like to write. So you write it down in your own form, in your own format, and thereafter give it some shape and bring it out into a document which is ready for you. Because it is important for you to understand where you are. It gives you a good background of what was your vision and where you are now, and it really helps you to understand where you stand today. Second is that it can actually help you to find another person to collaborate with. It could be a co-founder or a co-promoter, or it could be somebody who's wanting to invest in you. They want to see all these things. And at that point, you may just suddenly meet somebody tomorrow, and overnight you can't go and write a business plan. And then you may just meet an interesting person at a conference, and you may want to collaborate with him or her. And if you have a document, I'm not saying you should carry it with you all the time and go around pitching for it. And that's not what I'm saying. But keep something with you all the time, knowing fully well that you may bump into somebody with whom you could work. You may bump into somebody who could show interest in the business you do. You may find somebody with whom a long-term collaboration could happen. For that, it's very important that you have a well-written document with you. So please work on that. Technology, I think I don't really need to talk about how important is it. I think a month ago, we wouldn't have thought of doing a session like this on Zoom, right? So technology and the advancement in technology, this whole crisis has taught us that if at all we are not fully up to date and fully well versed with technology, this is the time for us to actually go all out and invest our time in technology. Learn. Invest your time to start with them. Not on money investment right now. Right now, invest your time. Understand what technology is and how technology can help your business. Be it machine learning or blockchain or artificial intelligence or whatever other tools, augmented reality, virtual reality. We hear so many jargons, but how many of us really know what these things are? And more importantly, how many of us really have thought about how can these actually help our business? A couple of months ago, we wouldn't have thought that we would be able to complete an entire audit in a remote manner. Today, my senior partners in Bangalore have completed audits sitting in remote locations completely and signed off. So how is that possible? It's because we are equipped for it, and the clients are also equipped for it. So we must also ensure that not just us, but all the people in the ecosystem, all the stakeholders in the ecosystem are also equipped. All our vendors, all our customers, clients, wherever possible, try and do a technological integration, digitize business, time for digital transformation for everybody, simply because work from home has to be something that we must keep in mind in the world that we move forward. And we also understand we are able to actually do it constructively also. How much of travel time is saved, how much of our commute time, not just the daily travel to office and back, but even all our meetings in Bombay and Delhi and wherever else. I was watching an interview of the Hindustan Unilever chairman, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, and he was saying he does 2-3 London trips every month. And sometimes he says every week I have to travel to London and back to attend 1 or 2 hour meetings. He's doing that. And now he says in the last 1 month, I've stopped that. My productivity has increased. My teams are more flexible. My teams are understanding things better and finding, and the Indian jugaad way of doing business, we are finding workarounds for everything. Protocols are being diluted, and suddenly we're all coming together closer. The top management and the rest of the team are actually meeting more often than they would in a regular day. We're all running daily battles, but here we all have the time and space. So work from home is actually, we're realizing, is actually getting to be very, very effective. And if we can make a few more changes to the way our organizations are, then it will really, really enhance our productivity in the years ahead. And lastly, what are the opportunities? I wouldn't say opportunity in the sense, business opportunity is not what I'm looking at here. I'm not saying that like, okay, crisis is a great opportunity for Zoom. There's no doubt about it. How many of us had heard of Zoom or used Zoom before the crisis began? But today, virtually every one of us is on Zoom for how many sessions every day? 2, 3, 4 conferences every day. We are on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts or whatever else that we use. So I'm not talking only about the business opportunity here, but I'm talking more about some of the other opportunities also which comes in terms of more time for us to reflect and reconsider, to look at whether our revenue models are right, whether our business models are right, whether we are prioritizing for the right things. Are we all just running every day? Most of us were doing 16, 17-hour days, and by the end of it, wondering, one full year has gone. What did we achieve in the last 1 year? Very little, but we are very busy. Suddenly we are not all that busy, and we are able to get that time to reflect and reconsider many of the things that we have been doing. Speed, innovation, better use of technology. I'm sure that once we come out of this and we all restructure the way we our respective enterprises, once we do that, moving forward a year from now, we would all have changed the way we work, much faster, much more innovative, much better use of technology. Reconnecting with people, helping one another, not just from a business perspective, but on a personal level also. Finally, it's personal relationships and the human connect which helps businesses also. I think it's about time that we all once again got back to basics and realized that it's not just about customer and vendor and product and all that. It's also about human relationships. And this crisis has just brought us all together once again. New models of living and working. I spoke about work from home earlier. A much cleaner environment. Many of us here are in businesses which are connected to environment, and many green warriors are there. And I'm sure that we're all happy that we're living in a much cleaner environment. Humility and acceptance. Egos are disappearing. Boundaries are crumbling. Everybody is coming together. We're understanding that competition is no longer the order of the day, and we all need to be humble, and we need to come together and work as a family, and only then is there a possibility for survival, let alone success. And finally, to conclude, the last line would be that communicate. There is no such thing as over communication when it comes to a crisis situation. Regularly communicate to everybody concerned: employee, customer, vendor, banker, family, all the others, friends, prospective business, prospective family, prospective clients. Everybody, talk to everybody, understand their problems, spend more time and try and understand what is going on. How best can we all come together so that collectively we have that confidence, and we give that confidence to one another, that we have that grit and we have that willpower, and that we have that tenacity to succeed in these very, very challenging times. So with these, I'll close, and quick recap. These are the 10 points that I spoke on, and I'll be happy to share the slides. I'll send it to Nirmal, and those of you who want to collect these slides can take it from him. And one last slide, whenever I speak on a topic of this nature, I close with the same slide, because it just changed my perspective when I first read it maybe 10 years ago. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the result of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. This is what the great Steve Jobs said. And in the current crisis situation, let me also add that while we do that with a sense of collaboration. Don't just go with your own inner voice, but also go with the voice of the world. The world needs you. We are all people who are very, very important as far as the world is concerned. So we must collectively look. Every decision we take, it cannot be a selfish decision where we are just thinking about ourselves or our families. It has to be a decision that we take, or actions that we do should also be for the collective good. So let us all come together, work together, and get over these challenging times together. Thank you very much. Nirmal, back to you.
Sure. There are a few questions in the Q&A section. If you could just take a look and answer some of them.
Sure.
And for participants, if you have any specific questions, can you raise the hand icon, which is below the Zoom options?
I haven't seen the Q&A, so let me just go through. Meanwhile, somebody can ask a question. I'll try and take it. Yeah, I have a question from Varghese CM, who says selling company land and building to pay bank loan and moving out to rented property makes sense now, as real estate is very bad too. Yes, very, very relevant. All sectors are very bad. I'm not saying that you must sell it immediately. Right now, when all of us are locked in at home, may not be the time. But this has to be a strategy. Non-core assets and unnecessary, unwanted land, etc. We must have a plan. Look out for a good price. Sell it only when you get a decent price. But there's no point waiting endlessly for the real estate market to improve, because it's going to take a lot of time.
Ajit John has a question for you.
Yeah,
Ajit,
please.
can you go ahead?
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon, Mr. Govind. Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you, Ajit. Probably a little louder would be nice.
Yeah. Is audible right now?
Yeah, fair enough. Go ahead.
Okay. Really refreshing sessions was there. Just one question I have is that post the floods in Kerala, we definitely had a business continuity plan in place. We planned a lot. We procrastinated and had 3 months of cash reserves, and everything was planned perfectly well. Now we came into one small problem is that this March was supposed to be accounting closing, and a lot of collections was supposed to happen. Now April has come up. The problem that we have is, I like to ask, have the clients or have the businesses migrated into online banking? Because most of the time we get the things of saying that the director has to come, they have to sign the check, then only maybe post lockdown we'll get your payments done. So now we spoke about Zoom, we spoke about the transformation, digital things and everything happening, but I feel like the clients have not yet migrated to online banking. Now you have told about their clients were equipped enough to do the auditing. So I like to look at perspective. Is the businesses actually going into net banking and everything, or are they following the same traditional methodology of check signing, then sending it across the office boy to the bank and then getting it cleared?
Ajit, that's a very relevant question. And in fact, last week we had a panel discussion with some of the senior bankers. And this is one huge challenge which they were also talking about. Because last 4-5 years, virtually all the banks they have done their transition well, and all facilities are available. Mobile banking, online banking, net banking, all these are in place. But still a large number of us have not fully moved into that regime. Thanks to demonetization, I think we have all become comfortable with e-wallets, and large degree of payments are happening through Paytm or Google Pay or other UPIs, etc. But whether net banking and online banking is being fully utilized, the answer is no. But will we do that once we get back to regular business? I think this will be one of the first priorities for many of us in the room who would not be using it well. That would be the first priority. I, for one, I've been enjoying the benefits of that over the last 2-3 years, and it makes life very, very simple if you're using the technology which the banks are giving us. And I'm sure that everybody is going to migrate towards that in the next few months, because it's a necessity. Because one doesn't know whether we are not very sure about whether we could have further lockdowns or whether we could have relapses of the virus and all that, God forbid. So we will anyway, all of us will be prepared for that for sure.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. Anything else?
Rakesh Doshi has the next question. Rakesh, can you go ahead, please?
Yeah, it was wonderful presentation. By the way, we are into manufacturing organization, have staff around 40 people. We want to stand by our employees by not cutting their salary, but uncertainty in cash flow is also there. So how can we effectively do it? We want to stand by, we want to retain their faith in us and in company.
Rakesh ji, that is again a very interesting question, and again is a topic on which a lot of discussion is happening. So some organizations are looking at paying the basic and keeping the employees on the rolls, and many of the other allowances are unfortunately having to be cut. Some of them are talking to employees and trying to move towards being more transparent about the business, explaining to the businesses that, see, this is this position, this is the crisis which the business or the entrepreneur is also suffering. So to try and move into some form of revenue sharing, which was never the case before. So fixed salaries are slowly migrating towards variable salaries. And once it is variable, then some part of it, or even a large part of it, is going to be dependent on a formula for revenue sharing. I think so. These are the ways in which people can be entirely cutting their salaries and putting them on probation till the economy revives. May not be the right thing to do, because we must understand that they also have families to feed, and so we should be very, very compassionate. But at the same time, we all have our cash flows to also be worried about. So it's a very fine balance, and I'm sure in the days ahead we will hear many more stories of what some of the businesses are doing, and probably if we do a repeat session, I'm sure there will be many more best practices which we'll be able to share.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have a question from Vibhu Bhaskaran. Vibhu Bhaskaran, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Govind. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please, Mr. Vibhu.
Go ahead.
Indeed. First of all, I wanted to say very informative presentation. I had to answer a couple of questions which we seem to forget running around, and what all we should concentrate on. So thank you for that. My question is, in these times, is it more prudent to concentrate on cash flows or profitability? What I mean was, before the COVID problem came up, below a certain amount of profit, we didn't take the orders. I have a manufacturing unit. Now, should that be reversed, that even if profit is very low, I should take orders just to keep on maintaining my cash flows?
Again, that's also it's a very tough question to answer, because I would definitely not recommend that you take on orders whereby you end up with a negative margin. So your costing system should be done, and your margin computations should be done very, very systematically, so that you ensure that you have a margin. So even if your margins are thin, it may make sense to try and continue to take on business. But certainly adding volumes without at the cost of losing money may not be a wise suggestion. Certainly not a good time for you to be losing cash, but ensure with a minimum margin, probably not the same levels of margins or profitability that you once enjoyed. Margins are going to shrink, but ensure that you have at least a very wafer thin margin when you do your business. And if that can be ensured, then certainly go ahead and sell as much as you can, and let the cash, let the whole cycle of cash come. Consumption is important for the economy. If all of us start looking at conserving money and keeping money only in our pockets, then how will the consumption increase, and how will the economy thrive? So money has to circulate in the economy. So let's all do our bit to help that process.
Thank you.
We have a question from Santosh Joseph.
Sure.
Yeah, good afternoon, Vivek. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Tell me, Mr. Santosh.
Yeah, so this is regarding this international funds. So, this time getting some fund transferred in a wire medium, that itself is difficult. Now, my question is, are these banks or the government is considering this a lot of formalities? We have to submit the bill copy, the invoice copy, and also some declarations in the bank to get it credited. So is there any discussion around, and is there any relaxation on those procedures as of now?
There are a lot of discussions, no doubt about it. Banks are also, they also understand the situation, and they know, especially for businesses in Kerala, large number of remittances are coming in from abroad, and they're looking at ways and means to do that. And from what I understand, the state level bankers committee, the SLBC, has prepared a document, and it has been submitted to the state government and to the central government and to the Reserve Bank, and they are waiting for certainly, lot of things, I'm sure you must be reading about all the steps being taken by the RBI and to ease some of the things, but procedurally there are still a lot of hassles which are being faced, and it certainly a lot of these will certainly be addressed. I think once there is more clarity on the lockdown, I think many more of these things will ease of doing business steps are certainly a priority for both the central and the state government.
Okay, so probably if the lockdown is getting extended for another 1 month or 2 months, certainly it should be relaxed. Otherwise, we are going into a big trouble.
Yes. No option.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the answer.
Thank you. Thank you.
There are a few questions in the Q&A section. Probably we could take those up.
Did I miss any? Just give me a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question here from Mr. Abdul Basit. To get people to use banking technology, banks should also build more confidence regarding security of the system. Today, news carry incidents of frauds, etc. Banks should improve confidence of people. Yes, certainly. I think that's again a very relevant point which came up when we had a discussion with the bankers, where the banks, the senior bankers were talking about all the steps being taken by the bank. And a very, very senior, very respected entrepreneur from our state joined that conversation and said that you're right, we fully applaud and appreciate all that you're doing, but you must also understand that if people are not entirely moving towards this, it's because there are certain apprehensions that need to be addressed, and what are the steps being taken. And so there are some frauds, but we must also keep in mind that these are a very, very, very small fraction of very small percentile of frauds which are happening on the technology and technical side of the banks. Most of the frauds that are happening are much larger scale loan frauds that are happening. The technology frauds are not that substantial when you look at the overall picture, but certainly there are a few instances in some of the banks which have come to the attention of all of us, and which is what makes us apprehensive. And I'm sure that the bankers are going to ensure that their systems are more foolproof, because the entire economy is now going to move to the online mechanism, and the volume of business on the online and digital world is going to be far more than in the real world. So I'm sure they will address their technology side for sure. We have a message from my friend Anil. Thanks. Financial management is possible to a good extent when we know how long the crisis is, but becomes challenging when there is uncertainty of the duration of the crisis. How do we plan finance? Any plans would fail if all the factors are variable. Absolutely, Anil. You hit the nail on the coffin, and this uncertainty is the biggest issue here. All the things that we have discussed in the last 1 hour, it's all it's all to do with the situation once we all get back into our working stream. But today, sitting at home, many of these things that we talk about, be it management, cash management, or working capital management, or receivable management, or payable management, all of these things, or the businesses that we do, or the processes, production, marketing, whether the markets that we are talking about, does that market even exist today? 2 months ago, we would have done a marketing forecast. Today, we don't even know whether people want all those things. And people who are into luxury goods, luxury products, and all that, do people want that? My friend makes very exotic chocolates, and it's something that we all, in the normal world, we would love to go and buy his chocolates on a regular basis. But in the world that we are in today, are people going to be spending a lot of money on exotic chocolates, or would they be happy with the Paris orange mithai? Is something that is the kind of uncertainty that is there for so many businesses. We'll have to figure that out, Anil, and uncertainty is going to last for some more time. So let's all come together and collaborate and see how best we can get through this. Question from Rajkumar regarding the current question. We are getting international payment from Google without submitting invoice every month by completing some formalities with Axis Bank regarding recurring payments. Great. So I know that some of the banks have been very, very proactive in that, and it's nice that you have pointed out that it's being done by your bank. But it's not happening with many banks. And in that banking discussion, some of the very senior PSU bankers were facing the wrath from some of the MSME businessmen, saying that you're not supporting us and all that. So yeah, there are issues, but I'm sure that all these banks will help. And there is the other side of it, is that SBI is offering a line of credit, an extra 10%, which the private banks weren't giving. So a lot of people are applauding SBI for immediately acting on it when a crisis comes, but blaming the senior bankers from the private banks. So it's all there. A lot of several banks people are doing their bit, and I'm sure that many more things need to be done, which I'm sure will be done. Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
I think those are the questions from the participants. If you have any more questions, please just mail us at nirmal.panikar@tiekerala.org. That's our secretariat email ID. So if you have any further questions, do send us. We will send you the presentation that Vivek just did probably in a day's time. And the recordings also would be shared. We'll probably post it on our YouTube page. Thank you, Vivek. Very appreciative of your joining us today, and the presentation too was very elaborate. I'm sure there are a lot more questions. People may send that across over a mail. Thank you again. Thank you, participants, for joining. We had close to 100 people joining today, so from across India as such. Thank you for joining. We have an exciting week coming up. We have lined up around 4 to 5 odd webinars. One which will be led by Mr. Harish Bijur, the brand strategist. We have our own SR Nair, charter member of TiE Kerala, who would be speaking to us. We have another focused on sales and customer retention. So pretty exciting week coming up. I hope all of you can join for each of these sessions. Most of them are lined up in the evening, so you can take your time and join us at that particular point of time. Mails will be sent to all of you. We have your email ID, so we'll be sharing that with you. Thank you again for joining. Thank you, Vivek. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Nirmal. Thank you to TiE, and thank you to all the participants for being here. And we look forward to working closely in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you all.